Hello, lovely beings. I'm so glad that you're here. You're being recorded. We're live streaming onto YouTube so that everybody can see us. Who's here with me and wants to come play so I can see you? I would love it if you turned your camera on. I kind of get tired of hearing myself talk. I'd much rather be in conversation with you. Joanne, hello. I'm so glad that you're here. Hi.
Yeah, me too. It worked out perfectly to come today.
Oh, that's excellent.
I guess lucky me, the link didn't work on the other day.
Yeah. Did you source that for it to happen that way? I think that's kind of cool if you did.
Yeah.
I think it's excellent. And I'm super lucky that I get to see you twice in one day. I get extra
I know. Back to back.
I know, right? We're gonna just real quick turn on. So good, so good. So who else is here? We had 47 people register for today's class. Ooh, isn't that exciting? 47 people. So Charlene, I see that you're here. And Reagan, I see that you're here. Please join us. Come off of mute, put your camera on. Let's hear you. So the cool thing about these pop-up trainings, I don't know what else to call them. I don't really like the term pop-up, but the cool thing about these trainings is that I get to interact with you and find out where you are instead of having an agenda about what I'm going to deliver. And I really like that because there's just something organic and sort of magical that happens in these organic conversations about where you are. So we took the month of September off, half of the month of August and the month of September off because people get super busy that time of year. But we're back here now in our Schatz Method community, in our student lounge. We're back here every week now. Tuesdays is my preferred day, which is why I invited you guys to come on a Tuesday. This week we're doing it on this day, and that's okay. And then they'll be available on YouTube if you want to do any replays. In the past, what we've done is each practitioner comes with a question. They either have a question about anatomy, or they have a question about what's going on with one of their clients, or they have a question about how to run a class, or they have a question about something that they read or learned, or something that I shared the week before that they tried and implemented, and they kind of want to see how that goes now. So these are all awesome possibilities for us to explore deeply what's going on for you, right? It's not my agenda. If I am just meeting you for the first time, or you're watching this for the first time and have not met me before, I'm happy to meet you. I love when you come and you're off camera so I can meet you and like interact with you. And who the heck am I? Why would you take yourself off camera for me? I'm Gina Schatz. I'm the developer of the Schatz Method. It is Reagan. Might do it next time. You're getting used to Zoom. Welcome. Look at you. I love it. Getting used to Zoom. You're doing great. You found the chat. That's like half the battle right there. Good job. So come off of camera, or come on camera whenever you'd like to. We'd love to have you. I was just embellishing on who I am and why I'm here. So eagerly answer your questions today. So I developed the Schatz Method along my tenure track as a bodywork practitioner. So I started as a massage therapist. I'm also a yoga teacher. I've done kettlebell certification and personal training. I have an undergraduate degree in physical science. It goes on because I love the body, and it's an endless treasure land of exploration. So I've spent my entire career doing it. And I graduated for the first time in 1993. So for those of you doing the math, I was 8 years old. Yeah, I'm a child prodigy. And so I've spent, a few decades here on the body, and I love it. I love it. And what I really love to do is I really love to pour into other practitioners who also love it, because I believe that it is an endless topic, right? It's the human body. There is no one on the planet who knows everything about the body. It's an endless topic. So we all get to continue endlessly studying it so that we can be experts at this amazing creation that we all have created as our muse and our way of living. So again, if you're just joining, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Please do feel free to come off of camera, come off of mute so that you can have your questions answered. Bring anything that you have, client-wise, anatomy-wise, clinic-wise, experience-wise, confusion-wise. I mean, I really love it when, as practitioners, we can be trusting enough to ask a question that you've asked somewhere else before and either got an answer that didn't make sense, or you've heard two different answers to the same question and you're like, what is the answer? Those are great. Those are great types of questions to bring, because we get to really explore what's behind it. Here's what's behind it for me. What's behind it for me is that not only is this an endless topic, but the topic is in Latin. It's in a language that we don't even speak anymore. So at some level, we're unincluded in the conversation before we start. That doesn't make for a real healthy conversation and doesn't build for, confidence building, confidence making. Doesn't make for confidence building. You know what I mean? So I love it when we can just come authentically and be like, look, I don't know what this is. And I really want to know what this is. And let's talk it out. So this is a total safe zone. If you've not been here before, that might be why you're not on camera, because you don't yet know that this is a safe zone. There's no other agenda than to just bring us all together. And I love talking about this topic and I love pouring into you. If I don't know an answer, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. But I do know some answers. I do know a lot of answers, and I love to create clarity for you so that you can be empowered to go create clarity for your clients, because we're up to big stuff in the world. We're up to big stuff. So thank you in advance for being here and for taking time out of your schedule to be here, to play, to advance yourself. Your clients and your students are benefiting from you being here. So on their behalf, I'm thanking you again for showing up. All right, so question for you. Who here has already absorbed or at least downloaded the anatomy guide that I prepared for you? Anybody? Joanne, you have? Yes, awesome. Would you be willing to share? Well, first of all, did you like it? You did? It was my first running start at like heavy graphics. I'm more of a people person and a body person than I am a graphics person. So thank you. Did you like it a lot?
I did, yes.
Okay,
I had downloaded it before after your seminar, way back in July, I think. And then I was glad you sent it again because it's got shuffled into all the other files. Yeah, I thought it was a great, succinct, excellent way to just approach the body and the functional anatomy of the body.
Oh, good. Okay, good. So I'm glad that there was some good meat in there for you. And you're an advanced instructor. So the idea that I could put something together for you that had value really matters to me. So thank you for that. Can I put you on the spot?
Okay.
More than I already have. What was your biggest takeaway from the anatomy guide?
Well, the end. The end, how you wrote, let me see, I'm going to say muscles, because I've been practicing just trying to say this to myself. Muscles move bones and create action at a joint. Identifying the action at a joint informs the prime muscular focus in a movement. Contracting the prime muscle in a movement creates length and strength. And all of the above prevent injury. So it's like my mantra right now.
I love that you read that. And so, Joanne, in your own words, like in your summary, what was it that landed with you about that? What was the takeaway for you in that summary?
Stretching does not exist.
Stretching does not exist. Yeah, we're going to actually talk about that next week, because it's like it's worthy of its own conversation for sure. Stretching doesn't exist. So as you're reading the summary and stretching doesn't exist and you're hearty into studies at the moment, do you want to tell everybody what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm in Inspired Beyond Anatomy level 2 already, right? I guess. I don't know. I finished my first 3 months with Gina and my group. So studying everything, anatomy-based, movement-based, and professional development, and integrating the two of them so that my mission and my vision are clear, not only for myself, but when I work with my clients.
Yeah. So you're in the mastery program. You're in the mastery program. You have taken so many classes. You've taken so many courses at your brain's full. You took Inspired Beyond Anatomy. You took Inspired Beyond Anatomy level 2. You're up to all kinds of good things. So yeah. So Joanne, as you're sharing with us, we get to know that you're sharing from like this really deeply educated, informed place. And so I love that. And thank you for letting me put you on the spot and for sharing what you know about functional mechanics. Sophia, I'm so glad that you're here. Hi. Thanks for coming off camera. We appreciate you. It looks like you might be frozen. Oh, hi. I see your smile now. Hi. Your internet's just breaking up a little bit. So for those of you who've not yet downloaded the guide, I'm going to just drop that in the chat here. You're welcome to go ahead and grab a copy of that for yourself. This Anatomy Principles Guide. There's actually 8 principles I've identified, 8 functional anatomy principles. And in this guide, I put 4 of them together with examples of what to do, what the principle is, how I'm basing that as a principle, and how it shows up when we're teaching movement. Now, I tend to use yoga as the medium of movement, and that's because it tends to be more universal, but I know there's controversy about whether that's really true. What it really is a whole body, top to bottom type of movement practice. And so it's really easy to use that and not have to take from a couple different movement practices. But anything that you see that's yoga applies to movement, right? Chair pose in yoga is, I'm sitting on a chair right now. It's life. And lunges in a yoga class are the same as lunges in a gym, right? And arms up, shoulder flexion happens whether you're in a yoga pose or whether you're in a gym doing overhead presses, right? And the same thing goes for all movement practices, Pilates and gyrotonics and all the things. So I'm not excluding anyone from that conversation. I'm actually including you. And so if you're not a yoga teacher and you're hearing things that sound yoga related, just turn your mind to like, what is the movement? Which is bringing us beautifully into today's conversation. So I really want to focus today in my share is on muscles and joint actions. Because what I tend to find in my clients, which I'm sure you tend to find too, which is why I said we, is that our clients seem to think that there's a laundry list of things that they need to know if they want to do yoga or get in shape or lose weight or get out of pain. And I'm in the get out of pain window. I mean, that's where I spend my days, getting people out of pain. I'm trained to do the other things, which is great. And I use some of those other things, movement practices, manual practices to get people out of pain. And every time I'm working with a client, it feels like they think there's a laundry list of things to do. Do you guys have that? Yeah, you do too, right? And here's what I also recognize. In the practitioner's mind, we also think there's like a laundry list of things to know. To be able to address their laundry list of questions. And if I can today, if I can just impart on you a succinct, compact takeaway, then I feel like I will have succeeded in streamlining your effectiveness so that you can go back to being confident and get stuff done. So in this concept of muscles and joints, I really do believe it's important to know the muscles of the body. Now, right out of the gate, I sound like I'm contradicting myself because there's over 600 muscles. So that kind of doesn't make it really easy. We don't necessarily have to know the names of every muscle and their origins and insertions and their nuances out of the gate to be able to know a muscle for the purpose of the conversation I'm having right now. That said, I really do think that if you're a body person, you must know the muscles. And if you don't yet know the muscles, or you knew them at one time and you forgot them, no worries. Join in. I have a great muscles and movement course, which teaches muscles as they move. We put them in the context of moving. Join in, refresh yourself, start for the first time, whatever step you're in. I really think it's important that we know all the muscles. That said, at this juncture of the conversation, if you're just opening up the anatomy guide for the first time, and we know that muscles are what create the movement, it's not the bones, then it's important to know what movement is happening and what muscle are we targeting. And we don't, again, have to know the name of the muscle. We can just know where it is in the body and be able to tell if it's moving, right? You tell if it's contracting. So for example, if we're going to do a lunge, whether we're in a yoga class or whether we're in a gym facility, or quite frankly, if we're walking, and every other step, we're in hyperextension of the hip, which is what a lunge is, right? So yeah, Joanne, you're doing it. Look at you sharing it with us. Show us. It's so good. I love it. Kinesthetic learning. We all are. So as we're doing a lunge or hyperextension of the hip, there is a gigantic muscle in the body that does create that joint action. There's a gigantic muscle in the body that is solely responsible for taking the leg back behind us, and the movement's not happening in the leg. Movement's not happening in the leg. Movement's happening in the booty. Movement, which is also known as the back of the hip, right? The booty is the back of the hip. So the movement is happening in the back of the hip. If the movement's happening in the back of the hip to get my leg to move, if I'm instructing someone on something about their leg, I'm not near the muscle, which means that now I can get feedback from my client and student that I'm not being clear. They can try things in their body that might not be anatomically correct, because the body will do whatever you ask it to do. If you ask it to move your leg back behind you, it'll move your leg back behind you, even if it uses the wrong muscle to get that to happen. So what we want to do when we're navigating injuries or preventing injuries is to know what is the muscle that's supposed to be working and what is it doing? Is it moving a bone or is it creating movement at a joint? Bones don't move, guys. If bones moved, they would have to be broken. The movement happens where two bones meet. The movement happens where two bones meet. If I'm going to move my leg back behind me, this is Murph, by the way. If you guys haven't met Murph, Murph got his name because he's perpetually out of alignment. So it could only be my skeleton who's out of alignment, because I'm in the business of getting people back into alignment. So we name him Murph. And look how, doesn't he look like he's happy? He's always smiling. He's like super happy. He's like, I got a job. I'm on it. Okay, cool. So he's going to show us hyperextension of the hip. All right, so here's Murph standing. And I just have rubber bands here because I show different muscle actions when I'm teaching. So I just kept that one on there. All right, so here he is. He's standing. And now he's going to step his leg back, or we're going to instruct, right, to our students, step your leg back. Boom, looks like this. But the leg bone, the femur, did not do the moving. The movement happened here, where the leg bone, the femur, and the hip socket, the acetabulum, where they meet. This is where the movement happened, in the ball and socket joint. If we're still thinking, though, that it's the leg that did the moving, the femur, even if we got that specific, that the femur did the moving, and we didn't have in our minds knowing that it was movement happening at the joint, then we're not clear even in our own mind's eye on what's doing the moving, because the bone's not moving by itself. The only way a bone can move, the only way a joint can move, is if the muscles contract and create that movement, right? So muscles move bone, action happens at a joint. These two principles together really work beautifully together, and they're a little bit needy to just have them be one principle. So they're two separate principles, and they really are two separate topics. If I'm going to step my leg back in a lunge, I'm going to tell my client, move your leg back. I'm not going to say, go ahead and hyperextend your ball and socket joint, your femur and your acetabulum. I'm not going to say that unless they're an anatomy geek and they know what I'm talking about. So we say, step your leg back. And what I want us to know is that it's joint action happening where two bones meet that is allowing that leg to look like it did the moving. And more importantly, I want us to know that it was the back of the hip, glute max, even if you don't know the name of the muscle, it's glute max that did that joint action primarily. It's like actually its only job. It's got a small secondary job. It's a rump shaker. It literally pulls that hip into hyperextension way back behind us when we're in a lunge, when we're lunging in a gym, or when we're on our yoga mat, and every other step, we're in hyperextension of the hip. It's literally happening all day long, unless it's not. And that's the key. If you're working with injuries, navigating them or avoiding them, really key to know that glute max is what gets my leg to look like it's moving, even though it's happening at the joint. Glute max takes my leg back behind me into hyperextension of the hip. And if glute max is not the muscle that did that, I'm setting up for an injury. So I said that this joint action happens in gait, right? Every time we take a step, every other step is hyperextension of the hip. If I'm not using glute max in that part of my gait, I will be one of those people that says, I went for a really long walk. I'm trying to walk every night, like to get my steps in after dinner, but my low back just is so sore after my walk. Why? Because glute max wasn't doing the action and another muscle was jumping in. So we need to know what the muscle's job is. And the job is always to move a joint, what that joint action is. In this case, it's hyperextension of the hip. Because if we know what's supposed to happen, we can identify when something's not happening. And when we can be in that zone of what's not happening that should be happening, we're in injury zone. Not creating them, preventing them, reversing them, healing them. And if that's what you're up to, if that's the game that you're up to, navigating injuries in any way, even if the thought of injuries like kind of makes you bristle a little bit because you're nervous, you want to avoid them, which means you got to know what's happening. Like you got to know what's the joint action and what muscle is creating that so that you can avoid the injuries, right? And if you're in the world of, you got an injury, no problem, I'm here for you, let's sort it out, then you got to know what's going on so that you can restore their function back to how it's designed. All right, I could go on this. These two principles, I could go on and on and on, but I'm going to pause there. How's that landing for you guys? What's coming up for you? Len, I see that you came in. So great to have you, and you're welcome to come off camera and unmute. Sophia, I wish that your internet was working. I see you and you're such a sweet face and you're frozen, so we can't see you. Maybe your internet is not working for you. It is Mercury retrograde for those of you who follow that. So we'll have a replay available on YouTube. So for those of you who are here, what's coming up for you on this anatomy principle number 1 and number 2? Muscles do the moving and the movement happens at a joint. Bones and muscles and the relationship to injury. Anything coming up? Is it all making perfect sense? Is that the first time I've ever said it perfectly the first time and you have no questions? Finding that hard to believe. I'm usually needing to repeat myself at least once. All right, awesome. Well, any questions for those of you who are not on camera, you're welcome to type your questions in the chat. I do answer them that way as well. I prefer to talk to you person to person because I'm a people person. And I like to know who I'm talking to, but you're welcome to post any questions that you have in the chat. Joanne, what's coming up for you? Put you on the hot seat.
I'm wondering, I was wondering what happens in the lower back when you're not using the glute max for, let's say, for walking, going up steps. I'm thinking about all the times, and definitely my yoga practice. I've had moments where I'm pinching my lower back in the warrior pose, say, for example. So, I mean, not now, not since I started the course.
Yeah.
prior to the course.
Just want to preface that, Gina. Yeah.
Is it like the erectus spinea that's pinching and causing that tension the following morning that you feel in your back, or what is that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Joanne, and I'm glad you asked it. I'm going to give you the answer and I'm going to walk my way through there. So to answer your guess about it being paraspinals or the erector spinae, it's not possible in the body to isolate a muscle on its own. They're not wired that way from the brain. They don't function that way. We're going to get into anatomy principle number 4 when we talk about the lever system, and it's going to all come together, like how many muscles actually create that movement. There's always a main guy, though, that does the movement. So in this example of hyperextension of the hip, the main guy is glute max, gluteus maximus. It's the rump shaker that I referred to. This is a little bit more complex to answer your question. So I'm going to walk myself into it. In the low back, there's a muscle that also attaches at the hip. And if it's used unilaterally, it does a job. And if it's used bilaterally, it does another job. Do you have any idea what muscle I'm guessing?
Piriformis?
Nope, that's a good guess, but piriformis is down behind the pelvis. Piriformis is here from sacrum to the femur, right? It runs in this direction. I'm talking about in this zone right here. Yeah. Oh. In the low back zone where we have the discomfort that was in your original question.
QL, quadratus lumborum.
Yeah, exactly. You and Sophia guessed it at the same time. Sophia, are you speaking Spanish to me? Because I'm super excited about that. Otherwise, it might be that, yes. Oh God, that's so exciting. I'm learning Latin and Spanish and muscle names. I'm totally geeking out right now in super enthusiasm, excitement. That's awesome. Yes, it's QL. So quadratus lumborum has lots, it's got its own call to glory, right? It's got its claim to fame is what I wanted to say. So it's got its own job to do. And I'm not going to list them here because I don't want us to get distracted off of hyperextension of the hip. But I want us to answer your question, Joanne, about how does the low back then become uncomfortable if all I'm doing is hyperextension of hip and glute max is supposed to be doing that job. Here's why. Because if I'm doing hyperextension of the hip down here, which is glute max, whoops, right here. I got a mirror image on my camera today, so I might move my hands in ways that look like I don't know what I'm doing. Let me put Murph's leg up here. I got glute max here that's supposed to be doing the job. The job being hyperextension of the hip, the job being this movement here in the joint.
Mm-hmm.
But if this joint's not doing that movement and I'm still walking, I'm taking my innominate and I'm moving it backwards, moving it backwards, moving it backwards. I have to be. If glute max isn't doing the job and I'm still walking, my body did what I asked it to do, even if it wasn't doing it functionally correct. Hence where we're at with the starting point of injury land. So QL attaches at the top of the iliac crest. And when it's in function, it can hike the hip on one side. We nickname it the hip hiker. Yeah. So it can pull up on the iliac crest, which creates a faux, I can't get Murph to do this because he's bolted. It creates a faux posterior rotation. Creates a faux posterior rotation, not posterior tilt, but a posterior rotation. Instead of the movement coming from here at the joint, it'll pull the iliac crest and the innominate back, because the muscle here is pulling up, 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 which is making this ilium move, move, move. Do you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sophia, you're back. I see your camera now. Awesome. So QL can jump in. Hi. QL can jump in and create a posterior rotation. It's not an actual movement, but it can create this tug on the ilium and move the pelvis so that it looks like you're still walking, but not through the function of hyperextension of the hip. That's why it's so important to know joint action and bypassing the action of this gigantic muscle that does that joint action. So if we have folks that come to us that say, you know, I have a low back ache, but I don't have any pain. It just aches after I'm done walking. And we don't know what the function is from the joints and the muscles that create walking. We won't be able to get to the source of their problem. We'll have them stretch their low back. If we're yoga teachers or personal trainers, we'll rub their low back and release them if they're massage therapists. And none of that will solve the problem. It will just take care of the discomfort temporarily until they're on their next 2-mile walk. So we really want to know the function if we're in the world of injuries, navigating them, preventing them, etc. Action happens at a joint. That's how bones move. It's not the bones themselves. It's where they articulate together. And there is a primary muscle that's doing that job. If we know that primary muscle that's doing its job and it's doing its job, we're probably pretty close to safe. I'm making a caveat because I don't want to make it like a blanket statement. But if you use primary muscle to move the joint, then there's no problem. If you're not using that primary muscle to move the joint, it becomes a problem because something else will jump in. Did that answer you fully, Joanne?
Yeah. And then I guess the next place is that if you're not using the glute max and QL is continually coming in, personal feeling here is that then it turns into chronic pain of a hip hike or a posterior rotation that isn't able to relax and balance itself out.
Yeah, it can become a chronic problem. And that's why in the method, in your mastery program, we focus so much on repatterning. Because we do create patterns in the body and we're supposed to, right? Like we're supposed to have patterns in our body of how to do certain things, right? Think about it. I use this example a lot. If every time we were facing a flight of stairs, we had to reconsider how to navigate that flight of stairs, we wouldn't get very far very fast. We'd have to keep thinking about every functional pattern in our body, right? The first time you go up a flight of stairs, it's a little dicey, right? You're little, there's like a few grown-up hands around you to make sure you don't, slip and fall, because you're just learning that pattern. But once you know how to walk up a flight of stairs, you just go. So anytime we do something repeatedly in the body, it's a pattern. And if we create a functional pattern that's not optimal, it's still a pattern. So in our method, we repattern. Yeah, so if you, for example, have a client who's got chronic low back pain, you know that they are consistently not using glute max and using QL to do hyperextension of the hip, which is a joint action that requires glute max, then you repattern them out of that by retraining glute max and undertraining QL, telling it when to be quiet by engaging other practices. So yeah, yes, that's why we spend so much time on repatterning in our method. Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions coming in today, guys? I could literally talk about this all day. Somebody new just came in. Jennifer, welcome. Deborah, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Please feel free to come off camera and unmute, ask any questions. So I've already given the class part of what I'm going to share today. And then the rest of it is what's coming up for you. How can I support you? How can I support you with the client work that you have? And if it's not on hyperextension of the hip, if you were here and just listened to all of that and you do not have a question on hyperextension of the hip or glute max or QL or anything like that, or the first or second principle in the guide, let me just drop that again in the chat so that you guys have a direct link to that. If you don't have a question relative to the guide, that's okay too. I'm just dropping that in the chat again for you. And if you're watching this on the replay, I'll put it underneath the YouTube link. You're welcome to grab that guide. If you don't have a question there, but you have another question, any anatomy question, any client question, any movement question, any manual practitioner question, I wear all those hats, so I'm happy to navigate questions for you and support you. The only thing I really am not willing to do, of course, is to do anything that's diagnostic on a particular client. I'm happy to troubleshoot with you though, and come up with some strategic plans if you have somebody in particular, but I won't put together a treatment plan with you on a client that I haven't seen. That's just not ethical. And hopefully you guys aren't doing that either. I'm sure you aren't. And I know everybody that, at least everybody that's in my circle, all of you, I know are highly, highly sensitive to ethical practices. And I know that because I hear from all of you. And I also know that you're navigating pain because you've been to the summits and engaged in conversation and asked amazing questions and dropped into the chat. All right, so any other questions coming up for you? Anybody here have a question on anything I can answer for you, support you with, support you around? Create more questions and answers. I'm pretty known to doing that too. Anybody? Okay, well, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for showing up here live again. Every moment that you invest in your own higher learning is an investment in your clients and in your future. So on their behalf, I want to thank you. And also on my behalf too. I'm a little greedy when it comes to our industry. I think that we're all amazingly talented and we get to be really acknowledged for that. And so anytime I'm in shared space with a practitioner who's really investing in themselves, I feel really honored. So thank you so much for coming and participating. And if you're watching on the replay, I feel the same way. And so please enjoy the guide. If you haven't downloaded it yet, please feel free. It's my gift. There's no hitches. You already have given me your email address. If you're here, that's how you got an invitation to come today. So you just have to get to just put your email address in again. That's how the system spits out that guide to you. So I see a love note coming in from you, Sophia. Do you know any resources about TMA movement? TMA, what does that stand for? It's not ringing a bell at the moment. TMA, therapeutic muscle activation? I don't know, I'm guessing. What's TMA movement? I'm gonna guess no, because I don't know what TMA movement, temporomandibular articulation. Ah, okay. Resources. Well, I do something manually for that. Sophia, are you a movement practitioner or are you a manual practitioner? Movement or manual? A yoga teacher. Okay. Welcome. Let me think what I could share with you about temporomandibular. Are you having someone with TMJ pain? Is that why you're asking? You're having someone with TMJ pain, or is it something that you, okay, yes. All right, so here's, oh man, here's the answer. The temporal mandibular joint, for those of us who are liking to see things, the temporal mandibular joint, TMJ. TMJ is usually a diagnosis, but I like to call it TMJ because that's the acronym for the joint. This is the last movable joint on the axial skeleton train. Okay. So I do have a manual assist that I offer folks. I'm a manual practitioner. So I do offer that to clients. And here's the truth. 90% of the time, it only takes care of it temporarily, if at all. And the reason is because, and this is more of a structural answer, the reason is because the sacrum, which is the keystone to the body, if it's out, it affects everything along the axial skeleton and also has a relationship with not only the cervical curve, but the cranium, the cervical curve through the four balanced curves of the body and the cranium through craniosacral law. If the cranium is out, or if the cervical curve is out, preventing the cranium from being in alignment, the next place that gets taken out on is the temporal mandibular joint. So we can keep addressing movement at the temporal mandibular joint over and over and over and over again and still be working only with symptoms. So the resources that I would recommend for you are diving more deeply into sacral alignment and sacral function. And I have a course on sacred sacrum, and the sacrum is the keystone of the structure of the body, and it's the foundation of the method that I use. That's how I'm like pretty keen on this one. And I've also trained in craniosacral therapy and others. And so I recognize that there's value in all of them. And a lot of the continuing education that I took was symptom driven. And when I started developing my method, it's because I wanted to just get to the source. I didn't want to have to do the Groundhog Day thing. And so in the course that I teach, that's available on Evergreen right now, you can download it at any time. There is someone who came to the class with someone with TMJ, like temporal mandibular joint symptoms, right? And we were absolutely able to tie it back to the sacrum. And that is, like I said, 90% of the time, what I find clinically the source of the temporal mandibular joint pain. So that's not the question that you asked. You wanted to know what articulation, movement, manual practices there were. And it would be, you're welcome. It would be, I think, irresponsible for me to just answer your question with an answer and not give you the base of all of that. If that worked for you guys, if you're hearing that and you're like, wow, I like that train of thinking, then great. I love having you here because that's how I roll. If that frustrated the crap out of you, you're probably going to continue to be frustrated by me because I'm so glad I answered your question, Sophia. Great. Because I tend to not go after symptoms. I find that to be like a game of whack-a-mole where we're just like hammering down symptoms and trying to quiet the body from giving us messages. And the body's giving us messages on purpose, and it's up to us to be a translator. So funny that we're created and written in Latin, and that's actually not the language that we're needing to translate, but the body is asking us to translate all the time. I love the question. And I could go on about sacrum longer than I could go on about the anatomy principles because it's just my jam. Any other questions coming up for you guys while you're here that I can support you around? Anything else coming up? Okay. Well, I'm going to give it one more second for you guys to fill up the chat. And if you want to pop off camera real quick or come off mute, if you have a question and you don't think you can type fast enough, go ahead and do that. You don't have to come off camera for you to come off mute, but let me know. Joanne, are you coming off mute? Okay. What do you got?
I just had I guess a comment, but maybe also a question. Just imagining that if there's TMG pain, and that is related to the sacrum, then there also must be quite a bit of tension in the pelvis, if they're related, which I'm saying in a way that cannot be good. That sort of like I don't know, maybe tail between the legs fear, or like tight and held back kind of thing. And then, I mean, so those two body parts would always completely mirror one another, correct? Like the TMJ, and then like even the tension in the jaw. I'm just thinking like, then that would be like the rocking of the pelvis would be like really kind of tight and rigid too. I don't know. It's just an observation.
Yeah, I like where you're going with it because you're piecing it together. And the truth is that yoga teachers and massage therapists, which I am both, I love us. Everything's not just tight, right? So we don't know. Sophia, I'm going to get to your question in just 1 second. We don't know if there's tension in the pelvis, but what we do know is that there's a connection between their relationship.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you said mirrored. The sacral curve mirrors the thoracic curve. The sacral curve influences the sacrum itself, not the curve, but the sacrum itself influences the cranium and vice versa.
Okay.
And vice versa.
Yeah. Okay.
Did I say earlier that the sacrum mirrors the cervical curve? Because that's incorrect. I didn't say that, did I? God, I hope I didn't say that. Okay.
You didn't.
Okay.
No.
Thank God. Okay, great.
And I have it written down right in front of me that it's lumbar, but I still said it incorrectly.
Yeah, lumbar and cervical mirror, sacrum and thoracic mirror. Exactly. Okay, let's check the chat, Sophia. Joanne, did I answer your question completely?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, great.
It's connected.
It's connected. And also, you know, there's stuff in the cranium, right? There's movable joints in the cranium. So now we're back into an anatomy lesson, but those, you know, the cranium's not a football. The cranium's sutured. There's movable joints. So there can be movement happening up here too. That's why I didn't say 100% of the time TMJ doesn't come from the sacrum, but most of it. Most of the pain in the body comes from the sacrum. Okay, Sophia, let me grab your question out of the chat. Let's see what you got here. What do you recommend to address a severe pronation of the feet? Does the problem begin in the feet or somewhere else? I know it has direct consequences in the knees. Yeah, exactly. Here's why. Because pronation of the feet is function at the ankle, right? Because we know that movement happens at a joint. So pronation of the feet is function at the ankle, and the muscles that make up the feet start below the knee. Muscles that make up the feet start below the knee. So that means that the relationship between the knee and the ankle and feet are real. And what we want to do is know what's the muscle. That's perfect. You bookended us for our class today. Yeah. What's the muscle that's doing the job? Or what's the muscle that's supposed to be doing the job and isn't? And can we get that muscle back to it? Now, there are 4 layers of muscles in the feet. So there's a lot of muscles to consider. If it were me, I would look at the muscles of the lower leg and find out what muscle is firing that's not supposed to, or what more likely in pronation, what muscle's not firing that's supposed to. And then look at where they attach. They attach underneath the feet. They create a stirrup underneath the feet. And so that stirrup is like literally like stirrups. If you had your feet in stirrups on a horse, it's like holding you in so that you can do stuff with the rest of your body going up. Those muscles are not balanced in their function. And that's how we get pronation and supination too. Awesome. See, it's all that song when we were little, you know, the knee bones connected to that. I used to think that was so trivial. And now I know it's because I was destined to be a body person, and it's more complex and beautiful than that. But there's also some truth to it, right? It's all connected to everything else. And we talk about that a lot when we talk about pain, right? So if you're still focused on where the pain is, there's only a 20% chance that you're going to get to any solution there. So the referral patterns are real. And that's why when we look for sources of problems, we want to keep following it like a treasure map until we get to the genesis. And that usually does look like a treasure map, like we're connecting dots along the way. Awesome questions, guys. Love it. Sophia, I hope that supported you and gave you the answer that you were searching for. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any other questions in the chat. I just checked. Yes, you're welcome. My pleasure. I don't see any other questions coming in on the chat. If you have any, again, you can go ahead and unmute real quick, even if you don't want to come off camera. But I just want to thank everybody for coming today and showing up here. I loved it. I mean, this is how I like to spend my lunch hour every day, talking to peers about amazing things about the body and putting strategic pieces together so we can create this treasure map of the gorgeousness that is the human body. We're going to be back here on Tuesday. I know today is not Tuesday, but we're going to be back here next week on Tuesday and at noon Eastern. And if that's not in your time zone, no worries. You can always catch us on the replay. And if you are watching the replay right now, even though we're live, but if you are watching the replay right now and you have a question, use the comment section. Send me some love notes in the comment section. I get really excited when Google tells me that someone is commenting and talking to me on YouTube, because I'm like, oh, I forgot about that channel. And I will happily answer your question for you. If it's a question that I don't have enough information about, I'll ask, and then we can have a running dialogue. And you can also come back to class next week and ask then as well. And then I'll use those questions for following weeks. So next week, we're going to go over more on the Anatomy Principles Guide. If you don't have that yet, feel free to download it and bring me any questions you have about the guide. I've edited it myself a few times, so I think I got all the spelling correct. And if there's some clarity that's needed, I would love to know that, because I would really like to write it in a way that there's no question about what's being written. So bring me questions on that too. Bring me anything you got. Bring me anything you have, and I'm happy to support you. So until then, I'm wishing you all the best of your best days today. And then tomorrow, I hope the day tomorrow is even better than today. And I'll see you guys all next Tuesday. Bye for now.